I mean, if you're going to take a 5-year hiatus from doing book reviews on YouTube, kind of an appropriate one to come back to, right?
I can't remember which American writer it was. I heard him speak and he said that his job is to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable.
In the house on the beach, protagonist is naturally paying rent. In the house at the cemetery, which reader has thought of as abandoned, is he living more or less illegally? Protagonist as a squatter? Jim don't know nobody in China. When Dickens, at 12, worked from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m., 6 days a week at the blacking factory, he also walked an hour each way to and from his family's Camden Town slum, and spent Sunday visiting his father in debtor's prison. Mahatma Gandhi. I see no virtue in being uninformed. One of Max Planck's sons was executed for plotting against Hitler. I am completely alone here now. Welcome to Books You Haven't Read. I'm your host, Nate Rankin. With me, as always, the co-host, Noam Chomsky. Noam, say hello to the people.
Typically, states regard the general population as an enemy. The task and role of the population is to be apathetic, obedient, passive.
That's my son. Reader's Block by David Markson. So, like most people, I'm assuming, I came to David Markson through David Foster Wallace. He, of course, has the afterword to Wittgenstein's Mistress that is also published as a separate essay in the collection Both Flesh and Not. As well, there is an article listicle type thing that Wallace published in 2007 for Slate that was basically like 5 direly underappreciated novels of the post-war era. Wittgenstein's Mistress was in that list, and in it, Wallace praised it as being among the foremost experimental literary pieces of fiction. And I had previously read both Wittgenstein's Mistress and This Is Not a Novel, not knowing originally that This Is Not a Novel is actually the second in what is often called the note card quartet or the note card tetralogy. Reader's Block is number 1. The third book is Vanishing Point. The fourth book is called The Last Novel, also coincidentally David Markson's last novel. The reason that it's called the note card tetralogy or note card quartet is that if you look, this is a pretty good representative page. A lot of white space in this novel. You can imagine that each of those paragraphs, or you might call them stanzas, each of those could exist on a note card. It's almost like a collection of all of these note cards that a writer named Reader has assembled as like the early draft or the early outline for this novel that he's trying to create. Should also mention that Reader's Block is published by Delkey Archive Press. The rest of the series, including This Is Not a Novel, you can't see it, but it's published by a different small press called Counterpoint. And so that suggests that this series was not conceived to be 4 books as such. Reader's Block and kind of, I imagine, the whole tetralogy can be separated, each of the books can be separated into sort of 2 distinct spheres. So in one sphere we've got the actual deliberations and actions and considerations by reader, by the person trying to write, to make the novel. And then the other, I would say like that's 10 to 15%. Then like the other 85 to 90% of the book is this cascade and collage of all these different anecdotes having to do with, literature, art, culture, history. All of these facts that Reader has consumed from a lifetime of reading. And these facts range really broadly. They can range from birth dates to death dates, quotes or titles of works themselves, to one section is like just the names of all of Pablo Picasso's wives and girlfriends. One of the big things in this novel, and probably really important to the reader's identity, is anti-Semitism and history, like history of the Holocaust. It's obviously, Reader is supposed to be a very close sketch of David Markson, or someone similar to. I don't, get the sense that we need to read Reader as David Markson, because to even put that much weight into the character as a character probably misses the point of, this being an experimental novel. It's much more about the concept and trying to depict the experience of writing, writer's block, creativity block, etc. One other interesting note is that this book was published in 1996. For you Silicon Valley history buffs out there, you'll note that Google didn't come online until 1998. But this novel really does feel like a Google novel. What I mean by that is to say that it depicts a world or it depicts a person very saturated with information. An interesting anecdote I found about this was that Kurt Vonnegut, I think, wrote or called or talked to David Markson and essentially asked him, what kind of computer did you use to put all this together? And really it was just the composite of David Markson's kind of experience as being a reader. It really is a love letter to being a literature or culture art nerd, a humanities nerd, really. And both Reader and David Markson are, really struggling, really second-guessing and questioning themselves on the details of their characters, respectively. And that's kind of what this novel is about. It's about not just the creative process, but the tedium of the creative process, the really, really unsexy side. Multiple lines in this novel are just wastebasket. Implying that all the previous notes that have just been put down are trash. It's a novel about the discarded parts of the novel. Taking things back to David Foster Wallace, this book really reminded me of a character from The Pale King named Claude Silvenshine, who is a fact psychic. And I want to read a section from The Pale King to give you an idea of why this book reminded me of that. There is such thing as a fact psychic, sometimes in the literature also known as a data mystic, and the syndrome itself as RFI, random fact intuition. These subjects' sudden flashes of insight or awareness are structurally similar to, but usually far more tedious and quotidian than the dramatically relevant foreknowledge we normally conceive as ESP or precognition. They come out of nowhere, are inconvenient and discomfiting like all psychic eruptions. It's just that they're ephemeral, useless, undramatic, distracting. How many people faced southeast to witness Guy Fawkes's hanging in 1606? The number of frames in Breathless. That someone named Fangi, or Fangio, won the 1959 Grand Prix. That notion of facts being intrusive or interrupting things really rings true to me. If we're assuming that Reader is someone that should hew close to who David Markson is, which I think is a safe assumption, then we're dealing with someone who has had 50 plus years of the anxiety of influence, the weight of cultural influence, and all that has on a creative person, on an artist. Artistic work, very fundamentally, is a response to kind of the art and history and culture that you have consumed. It does just a really good job at depicting the weight of that, and is ultimately about, really, I would say, the failure of the quotidian failures of the creative process. It reminds us that the creative life is not very inspiring looking, is often as tedious as it is anything else. I chose to pretty actively look up different references. That's not to say that I looked up everything that I didn't know, because there was a lot I didn't know and wasn't familiar with. But when you're looking up like 3 or 4 things per page, eventually you just want to have the experience of uninterrupted reading. So I might not know the name of a painter or a opera singer or something of the sort. And I would go to, get on my phone, get on my computer, and go down like a Wikipedia rabbit hole. And it's interesting comparing the two experiences of this book with the internet, scattered as it is, going on those kind of Wikipedia rabbit holes where you first look up a name and then you look up a name of their work, and then you find other people associated, and on and on and on. That's a more ordered experience, strangely, than this kind of a constellation of facts. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Reader's Block. I think if you like Wittgenstein's Mistress, you'll probably like Reader's Block. It might actually be a better starting point. It's a little bit shorter than Wittgenstein's Mistress, and it gets you used to kind of the zany conceptual side of David Markson from his later life that he's really known for being. If you've never read Wittgenstein's Mistress, then I would say you'll probably like this if you are a fan of the show Jeopardy! It's got just a lot of kind of trivia for trivia's sake, and it uses kind of that collage of trivia to make a really interesting and poignant novel on the creative life and the creative process itself. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Got anything to add, Noam Chomsky? Nah, he's good. I will be back with more book reviews, probably at a date to be determined. Set your expectations low, and hopefully I will just barely meet them.